Hello friends, this is Growl. In this video, I'm going to rank all tanks from worst to best for Mythic Plus as they are right now in the Shadowlands beta. Now that the release date is coming closer, everyone is looking to see what class they want to main or maybe play as an alt. By far, the most common question I get right now is, how do you rate the tanks right now in Mythic Plus? It must be a hot topic because I don't even play tank. I've gotten the opportunity to play quite a few beta keys right now with a wide variety of tanks, and I want to share my insight with you. Before we start, it's time for the obvious disclaimer. This is beta. Everything is changing really fast. There are still tons of tuning patches yet to come before the game is released, and there still will be plenty more after that as well. This is only where tanks stand right now in this moment on the beta. Don't sweat it if your tank is low on the list. It hardly means anything right now. As always, I recommend picking a class that you enjoy the most and that you think is the funnest to play for the start of a new expansion. If you really feel roadblocked later on, you always have the option to reroll or change specs later. Beta might be a good indicator of how tanks are likely to perform though, especially when it comes to their playstyle and basic rotation. Although I haven't done testing on them myself, I've healed a bunch of tanks and talked to many good ones also who have been putting a lot of time on beta in order to create this list. Another thing regarding tanks is, tanks are always in short supply. They are definitely the most impactful and needed role in Mythic Plus. If you're looking to play a tank, you can generally play whichever spec you want for dungeons and you will still have an easier time finding or setting up groups. Don't let a ranking scare you from playing a tank you enjoy and that you're good at. There are three main factors that I think about when judging tanks right now. First is their survivability. This is the obvious one. Survivability can be a mix of mitigation and self-healing. Different tanks have different flavors, so I'm just grouping this all together into one. Survivability is definitely the most important factor for tanks right now. One important thing to consider is, at the beginning of expansions, just staying alive can be extremely difficult. If you're comparing right now to Battle for Azeroth, we've been playing these dungeons for 2 years with a tremendous amount of power creep, including essences, corruption, azerite, and more. Tanks in BFA will almost never die through mitigation, except to insanely dangerous stuff, and their damage and utility matters a whole lot more. Once everyone is stripped of all that power, however, survivability becomes king. Next is damage and threat. I group these together as they are highly correlated. Damage is important not only to maintain threat and to keep the team alive, but also to speed up the dungeon. In Battle for Azeroth, one of the biggest reasons warriors were so dominant is because they did loads more damage than any other tank. More damage always leads to higher keys timed, which will define the meta and eventually trickle down to all levels of play. Besides everything else, doing damage is more fun. Even as a tank or a healer, doing huge damage and seeing big numbers always makes the experience more enjoyable. Last is utility. This is a really broad category, but I place anything that either speeds up the dungeon or makes it safer for others besides survivability and damage in this category. Utility can come in a lot of forms, and it depends on the encounter design as well. Blood Death Knight's Mass Grip could completely trivialize the hardest trash pack of the dungeon, or it could do completely nothing. I'm considering the dungeons in their current state right now when I think about utility. How the tank's kit interacts with the challenging parts of the dungeons is the important part of utility. Now let's do some ranking. Since there are only 6, I'm just going to go from worst to best and not make any sort of tier list or ranking system or anything. We'll start from the weakest dungeon tanks and go to the strongest. In last place, I have to put Protection Warrior. I honestly can't believe how fast Prot Warrior has fallen out of favor, and it was hard to even get footage of playing with Prot Warriors for this video because no one wants to play it. Traditionally, Prot Warrior has been very strong mitigation and damage, but lacking in self-healing and utility. With the nerfs to Warrior, along with the improvements to the other classes, Warrior just isn't the strongest anymore. Its damage is less than most of the other tanks, and because it's early in the expansion, it's still going to be taking heavy damage even through its mitigation on some of the tougher mobs. Spell Reflection is a powerful ability, and it's possible that if Warrior gets some buffs to its survivability, we may see it rise up the ranks, due to the immense power of Spell Reflect on certain bosses or trash. The biggest thing warriors need right now is just a buff to their mitigation. Losing Vision of Perfection, along with the talent reworks, definitely hurt them quite a bit, considering how squishy they can be without their shield block up. Next, I'm going to say Guardian Druid. I know we have a lot of Bear fans out there, and I hate to do it, but right now it just isn't looking like it's going to be one of the best tanks. It still has everything it needs to do high keys, it's just a bit harder to pull off. Its damage isn't at the level of some of the other tanks, and the utility that it brings doesn't make up for it. One of the biggest strengths of Druid was its ability to be self-sufficient with Frenzied Regeneration as a big self-heal on a short cooldown. The ability got changed, so instead it heals for a little bit less, but increases healing received when it's active. This makes it feel a little bit better as a healer, but from a tank perspective, it's definitely a step down on the power level. It's possible as the expansion goes on that Bear starts to scale better and becomes tankier, but right now, it's really rough to keep up many stacks of Ironfur with such lower haste, and mobs are hurting even more now. I think Druid needs a bit more self-healing as well as some more damage to help with threat outside of Incarn to be ranked among the top tanks. Although I was a little harsh on these two, I think it's possible that all of the remaining tanks could be top tier in their current state right now. They are all somewhat close and they bring their own unique benefit to dungeon runs. I'm going to rank them, but keep in mind they are all powerful in their own way. In fourth, we have Blood DK. I don't think fourth place really does it justice considering how strong it is right now. Blood DK is a really solid balance between damage, survivability, and utility. Its damage isn't top tier, but it at least does enough to keep threat, most of the time. What it lacks in damage, it also brings in utility. Mass Grip, and even just Single Grip are insanely powerful, and even if they don't do more damage, they're definitely increasing the team's damage. Mass Grip makes even bigger pulls possible. On top of that, Control Undead is useful in so many dungeons. Given the undead theme of the expansion, there are tons of mobs that DK can control that do high amounts of damage and also just make things safer. Blood DKs do have the problem of dying before they can get off a death strike, however, with the power level of every tank decreasing, this is starting to become a problem of every tank, not just them. Next is Prot Paladins. Right now, Prot Paladins are definitely the glass cannon of tanks. I don't know if that's completely a good thing, but they do insane amounts of damage. With Bulwark of the Righteous Fury legendary, Prot Paladins are putting out huge damage with Shield of the Righteous. Pallies also seem like a really fun class to play. You have the ability to heal with Word of Glory or deal damage and increase mitigation with Shield of the Righteous. With the holy power changes in Shadowlands, Shield of the Righteous uptime and damage are higher than ever. The one downside is that this mitigation isn't very strong. In any reasonably sized pull, you're either going to need more cooldowns on top or just to do a whole lot of kiting. I think this class might be one of the higher skill ceilings, and if you can pull off doing that big damage while surviving, you can significantly boost the speed your group is running dungeons. Paladin also brings some pretty specific and unique utility like Blessing of Freedom, Protection, and Sacrifice. All of these spells are super helpful, especially on certain boss fights. In second place is Vengeance Demon Hunter. Vengeance got some really solid changes coming into Shadowlands and is looking like one of the top tanks. Vengeance is doing great damage, second only to Prot Paladin. Spirit Bomb with Immo Aura and the Vitality Sacrifice Legendary are putting out big numbers, and considering that you also bring Chaos Brand, which increases the magic damage of your group, you're really speeding things up if you have casters in your party. The new talent, Demonic, allows you to get a short meta window so that you can control your mitigation much better. Demon Hunter is also just super fun to play. You can fly through the air, and also you have a cheat death, which always feels awesome, until you proc it, that is. I expect we're going to see a lot more Demon Hunter tanks in the meta for Shadowlands. Get it? Meta? Sorry. Also, the damage from Demon Hunters is a bit more split up, while most of the damage from Paladin is coming from Shield of the Righteous. And since Paladins are a damage outlier right now, I think they're much more of a potential target for nerfs. This is why I give the slight edge to Demon Hunter, although they're very close. One problem that DH might encounter is needing to take a more defensive build when pushing the highest keys. In Battle for Azeroth right now, a Vengeance can do comparable tank damage in lower keys, but once you get into really big keys, you start needing to take more defensive talents and the damage really falls off. Last and currently on top is Brewmaster. Brewmaster is so incredibly tanky right now in the current build of beta, it just cannot die. No, like really, it just can't die. There's a conduit right now that has a small chance to heal during heavy stagger, and it just heals way too much. On top of that, Magic Stagger was recently brought back, as well as the addition of Celestial Brew. On a 30-second cooldown, you get a massive absorb shield that scales with attack power and versatility. I think it's possible that this also receives a nerf even after the conduit's fixed. Although Brewmaster damage isn't quite on the level of DH or Prot Pally, I still think it's pretty good with the addition of Touch of Death, and also you bring your Monk Mystic Touch debuff, which is always valuable. The biggest difficulty Brew faces right now seems to be Threat, especially on AoE. Normally, you keg smash the meat of the pack, and then you have Jadewind to pick up everything else. However, with the target cap on Jadewind, it becomes more complicated getting Threat on pulls with many mobs. I think I'd like to see Celestial Brew tuned down just a bit, along with Jadewind being uncapped, and then hopefully we can see Brewmaster rank fairly among the other tanks. That's it, all 6 tanks, ranked from my experience healing them. I think it may be a bit controversial having Brew ranked at the top, but ultimately I have to rank tanks in their current state because I can't base it off of a change or fix that I think will happen. Did I make any huge mistakes? If you disagree with my list, let me know what you would change in the comments below. And thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate it if you gave it a like and subscribe to my channel. I'll be coming out with lots of World of Warcraft Shadowlands beta content, as well as in-depth guides and walkthroughs once the game is released. Happy keying!